Good evening. Tonight, federal agents say they've dismantled an air cargo smuggling network that moved everything from cash to counterfeit goods through private airports.
The FBI and the DEA made entry before sunrise, seizing planes and pallets they say were worth more than $90 million.
The coordinated raid stretched from Florida.
The FBI and DEA are conducting a massive operation against an aviation cartel that controlled more than $90 million in drug shipments. Over the past few months, federal agents have been gathering evidence, wiretapping conversations, and tracking financial flows to track down the organizers of the scheme. Today, we'll show you exactly how this special operation unfolded, from the first suspicions to the final arrests. The investigation focused on an organization that investigators call the Air Corridor. Its members used a network of private jets and legal airlines to transport cocaine from South America through Central America directly to the United States. According to the DEA, the group operated for at least 5 years, developing a complex logistical system that included rogue pilots, corrupt controllers, and a network of covert airfields. The scheme operated according to a clear algorithm. Cocaine was purchased in Colombia through intermediaries who had connections to local producers. The goods were then delivered by trucks to small airstrips in the jungle, where private turboprop aircraft such as Cessna Caravans and King Airs were waiting. These aircraft were registered to fictitious tour companies or charter services that, on paper, transported passengers and cargo between the islands of the Caribbean. The pilots were given fake flight routes that formerly led to Mexico or the islands. But in fact, the planes changed course over the water and headed for pre-prepared landing sites in Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. At the same time, DEA agents discovered that the cartel was using a GPS spoofing system to mask the real coordinates of the planes during the flight. Special equipment installed on the planes broadcast false signals that showed civil aviation radars as legal routes, while the real trajectories passed much lower, outside the standard control zone. This technology allowed to avoid questions from aviation authorities and reduce the risk of interception by patrol services. The first breakthrough in the case came after FBI analysts noticed an anomaly in the financial statements of a small Florida airline. The company declared minimal revenues, but regularly purchased fuel in amounts that corresponded to the intensive operation of several heavy aircraft. Cross-checking of bank transactions showed that the money came from offshore accounts registered to front persons in Panama and Belize. These same accounts appeared in cases related to drug money laundering in other states. Meanwhile, a DEA surveillance team in Texas had spotted suspicious activity near an abandoned ranch near the Mexican border. Satellite images showed fresh tracks on a dirt runway, even though the landowner claimed the area had not been used for years. The agents set up hidden cameras and recorded 3 nighttime landings over the course of a month. Each time, the plane landed without lights, unloaded several dozen bags, and took off within 20 minutes. Immediately after takeoff, trucks with Mexican license plates arrived at the site, picked up the cargo, and disappeared down the freeway. The operation became an interagency investigation. The FBI took over the financial side of the operation, tracking the movement of money through the banking system. The DEA focused on field surveillance and introducing agents into the cartel's circle of trust. The Drug Enforcement Administration also brought in CIA analysts to monitor supply sources in South America. At the same time, Customs and Border Protection stepped up surveillance at small airports along the Mexican border where insiders were suspected among the staff. Over the course of 8 months, investigators gathered evidence on 27 people who occupied various positions in the organization's hierarchy. They included pilots, dispatchers, airline owners, fuel suppliers, mechanics, and financial intermediaries. At the top of the pyramid stood 4 men who coordinated all stages of the operation via encrypted messengers and used a system of code words to discuss the details of deliveries. One of them had dual citizenship and frequently traveled between Miami, Panama, and Bogota under the guise of a real estate businessman. The team then moves into the final stages of preparation. Once the evidence was organized, the prosecution obtained federal court orders to conduct simultaneous searches of 32 locations across the country. This included private residences, airline offices, airport hangars, warehouses, and bank vaults. The operation plan called for synchronized raids at sunrise to minimize the risk of information leaks and evidence destruction. On the morning of November 12th, more than 200 agents simultaneously entered facilities across the United States. FBI Special Forces stormed the airline's headquarters in Florida, where they detained 3 executives during a meeting. Laptops with open spreadsheets containing flight schedules, payment amounts, and supplier contact information lay on the negotiating table. At the same time, DEA agents cordoned off a hangar in Texas, where they discovered 2 light aircraft with altered serial numbers and hidden cargo compartments. The mechanics who were on site tried to escape through a rear gate, but were intercepted by a capture team. At the same time, agents broke into a luxurious villa on the California coast, where one of the main financiers of the scheme lived. In the safe, they found $2 million in cash, fake passports in 5 different names, and a flash drive with detailed records of all transactions for the past 3 years. The owner tried to destroy the computer hard drive, but technicians managed to remove it before the data was completely erased. Meanwhile, at one of the secret airfields in New Mexico, agents intercepted a plane that had just landed with cargo. The pilot had not had time to shut down the engines when armored SUVs blocked the runway. Inside the plane, they found 380 kilograms of cocaine, vacuum-packed and placed under the false floor of the passenger cabin. The pilot initially refused to testify, but when he was shown recordings of his conversations with the coordinators, he agreed to cooperate with the investigation. As a result of the operation, law enforcement officers seized more than 800 kilograms of cocaine, about $9 million in cash, 6 airplanes, 23 firearms, and dozens of electronic devices with compromising data. DEA experts estimated the total street value of the seized drugs at more than $90 million. According to preliminary estimates, the cartel made at least 2 trips per month for 5 years, which means a total turnover of more than $500 million during the entire period of its activity. 24 people have been arrested, including 4 pilots, 6 logisticians, 5 financial intermediaries, and 3 senior executives. 3 suspects remain at large, having likely fled to Central America shortly after the arrests began. International warrants have been issued to Interpol. The suspects are charged with participation in a criminal organization, conspiracy to distribute drugs, money laundering, document forgery, and illegal use of airspace. If convicted on all counts, they face sentences ranging from 20 years to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The prosecutor's office has already said it will seek the maximum sentences for the organizers of the scheme. FBI officials emphasized that this operation demonstrates the vulnerability of even the most sophisticated criminal networks to coordinated actions by federal agencies. The use of aviation to transport drugs remains one of the most dangerous threats to national security, as it allows for the rapid movement of large volumes of goods, bypassing ground checkpoints. Each such strike on the cartel not only removes tons of cocaine from circulation, but also destroys the logistics chains that feed the entire illegal trade industry. The investigation is ongoing, and investigators do not rule out more arrests in the coming weeks. Analysis of seized electronic devices has already provided the first clues to possible accomplices in other states and abroad. Agents are also checking the detainees' connections to other known drug cartels to determine whether this network was part of a larger transnational structure. A closer look at the seized evidence revealed additional aspects of the cartel's operations. FBI forensic experts recovered data from partially damaged hard drives found in the airline's office. The files contained complete accounting records for the past 4 years, including the names of suppliers in Colombia, the amounts paid to pilots and mechanics, the costs of bribing officials, and detailed routes for each flight. One of the documents contained a list of 12 airfields in 5 states that were used for unloading. Half of them were still unknown to law enforcement. Investigators found that the cartel paid pilots between $50,000 and $100,000 per flight, depending on the complexity of the route and the volume of cargo. Mechanics who modified the planes and installed hidden compartments received up to $30,000 for each modification of the aircraft. Controllers at corrupt airports received monthly payments of $5,000 to $15,000 for ensuring smooth takeoffs and landings without unnecessary questions. This payment system allowed the cartel to maintain the loyalty of key participants in the scheme for years. Financial analysts found that drug money was laundered through a network of car washes, fast food restaurants, and small construction companies across the country. The shell businesses overstated their income to justify large cash deposits into bank accounts. The funds were then transferred to offshore accounts under the guise of paying for consulting services or international equipment shipments. From offshore, the money was returned to Colombia to purchase new shipments of cocaine, closing the loop. One of the most disturbing revelations was the involvement of former military pilots in the cartel. The 3 pilots arrested had experience in the U.S. Air Force and Coast Guard, which gave them a deep understanding of radar control systems and aviation security procedures. Their knowledge was used to plan routes that avoided heavily patrolled areas and were in weak radar coverage. One of the pilots even had access to classified materials during his service, raising further questions about possible leaks. DEA agents have also linked the cartel to several violent incidents in the border regions. In 2 cases, people who could potentially testify against the organization disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Their bodies were never found, but witnesses reported receiving threats from unknown individuals before their disappearances. Investigators believe the cartel had a separate group of enforcers who were tasked with eliminating potential informants and resolving conflicts with competitors. The technical perfection of the operation attracted particular attention. The planes were equipped not only with GPS spoofing equipment, but also with systems for automatic cargo dumping in case of a threat of interception. Hydraulic mechanisms were found under the fuselage of several planes, capable of opening hatches in a matter of seconds and dumping packages with drugs into the water or difficult terrain. Such a system allowed the pilots to get rid of evidence even before the forced landing, while retaining the ability to deny any knowledge of the illegal cargo. FBI cyber experts have revealed the structure of the cartel's encrypted communications network. The organizers used modified versions of popular instant messengers with additional layers of encryption and a function of automatic message destruction after a set time. To coordinate the flights, one-time code phrases were used, which changed after each operation. Even if law enforcement officers had intercepted a single message without the context of previous and subsequent communications, it would have remained incomprehensible. However, the mass seizure of devices during raids allowed analysts to restore the full picture of correspondence over recent months. The cooperation of one of the captured pilots opened a new line of investigation. He reported the existence of a parallel scheme for transporting weapons in the opposite direction from the United States to Central America. The planes that delivered cocaine to the north returned not empty, but with loads of semi-automatic weapons, ammunition, and tactical equipment purchased legally through fake buyers at gun fairs in the southern states. These weapons were then sold to local criminal groups in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, creating an additional revenue stream for the cartel and increasing violence in the region. The leaders of the operation emphasized the importance of international cooperation in the fight against transnational crime. During the investigation, agents closely coordinated with the Colombian National Police, who carried out parallel arrests in Bogotá and Medellín. 5 suppliers and 2 financial coordinators who provided the Colombian part of the operation were detained. An additional 400 kilograms of cocaine that was being prepared for shipment were confiscated, and documents confirming links to other international drug networks were seized. This case is yet another example of the evolution of organized crime in the 21st century. Modern cartels operate as transnational corporations with a clear hierarchy, specialized departments, and long-term strategic planning. They invest in technology, hiring qualified specialists, and building sustainable logistics networks. It is possible to confront such organizations only through the coordinated work of various agencies, the use of advanced intelligence technologies, and international legal cooperation. We continue to monitor the development of the case and the consequences of this large-scale operation. Agents also established that the 3 leaders of the cartel had close ties to other criminal networks that specialized in the trade of synthetic drugs and precursors. Intercepted correspondence indicates negotiations to expand their activities into the fentanyl market, which caused particular concern among law enforcement officers. Fentanyl, a synthetic opioid 50 times more potent than heroin, has been responsible for an overdose epidemic across the country. Its ability to be transported en masse by air could have catastrophic public health consequences. Prosecutors have already prepared indictments against all detained suspects. The first court hearings are scheduled for early next month. Defense attorneys have announced their intention to challenge the legality of some of the searches and wiretaps, but prosecutors are confident in the strength of the evidence gathered. All warrants were obtained in accordance with procedure, and technical means of surveillance were used strictly within the limits of judicial sanctions. Meanwhile, the DEA announced the creation of a special task force to monitor aviation threats in the field of drug trafficking. The group will include representatives from the Federal Aviation Administration, Customs and Border Protection, as well as military analysts with experience in airspace control. It is planned to implement new systems for tracking suspicious flights, increase inspections at private airfields, and tighten requirements for the registration of light aircraft. Special attention will be paid to identifying modifications to the sides that may indicate their use in illegal activities. In parallel, the Ministry of Justice initiated an audit of the procedures for issuing pilot licenses and flight permits. It turned out that several detained pilots continued to have valid permits, despite previous administrative violations and suspicious financial transactions. Regulators recognized the need to strengthen background checks and implement a system for monitoring the financial status of pilots who have access to large-scale private aircraft. The region's public reacted with relief to the news of the cartel's defeat. Residents of border counties have repeatedly complained about suspicious night flights and activity at abandoned airfields, but their complaints often went unheeded due to a lack of local law enforcement resources. Now, sheriff's departments will receive additional funding and training to detect such operations at an early stage. The leadership of the FBI and DEA held a joint press conference where they presented the main results of the operation and thanked all the agents involved for their professionalism and dedication to the cause. The DEA director emphasized that the fight against drug cartels requires constant vigilance and readiness to adapt to new tactics of criminals. Modern criminal organizations use the same technologies and methods as legal businesses, so law enforcement officers must constantly improve their skills and tools. FBI officials added that the operation was made possible thanks to information from ordinary citizens who were not indifferent to suspicious activity in their communities. The agencies urge people to continue reporting any unusual events, as such signals often become the starting point for large-scale investigations. Security experts say the cartel's elimination is a significant achievement, but it doesn't mean the end of the problem. Demand for drugs remains high, meaning other organizations will try to fill the gap in the market. Law enforcement is therefore preparing for a long campaign aimed at identifying and dismantling new networks that will inevitably emerge in place of the one that was dismantled. The investigation also drew attention to the need to strengthen control over offshore financial transactions. A significant part of the cartel's funds pass through jurisdictions with lax customer identification rules and minimal cooperation with U.S. authorities. The Treasury Department is considering the possibility of introducing additional sanctions against banks and financial institutions that do not exercise sufficient diligence in checking suspicious transactions.